So hello everyone to this tutorial on Hypertable. So first we'll be going through what is Hypertable and why is it useful, and next we'll look into the installation and a quick demonstration. So first of all, what is Hypertable? So Hypertable is basically a distributed NoSQL database. It is inspired by Google's Big Table design. So Google Big Table is already a proven scalable design that powers hundreds of Google services. It's also 100% open source, and the C++ implementation makes sure that it has optimum performance. Another thing is that it has comprehensive language support. So all the popular languages you can think of like Java, Node.js, PHP, Python, Ruby, C++, all are supported. And there's something called an uptime support subscription. So if you're having an enterprise or having any business use case for this, so there is also a subscription. So they give commercial support. Next, we'll look into why Hypertable. So the key factors are performance. The benefit is that it is highly efficient and the implementation delivers all the advantages that you get from better performance. For live applications, Hypertable can help deliver much more responsive user experience by reducing overall request latency. And for offline applications, higher throughput is achieved. So that means more work can be accomplished in a given amount of time. Next is scalability. So Hypertable was designed for the purpose of solving scalability problems. That problem is not handled well by a traditional, like a relational database or RDBMS. So while it is possible to design a distributed RDBMS system by sharding, which means that you break the dataset into shards or separate pieces, this solution will require an enormous amount of engineering effort, and also the resulting system will have inherent weaknesses because the core database engine is not designed for scalability. So Hypertable is based on a design developed by Google to meet their scalability requirements and solves the scaling problem better than any other NoSQL solution. Good fit for wide range of applications. So most of the currently available NoSQL databases are based on hash table design, which means that the data that they manage is not actually physically ordered by any meaningful keys. These systems do not lend themselves well to applications that require fast access to a range of data. So, for example, if you're working with analytics or like sorted URL lists or messaging applications, so these systems are not very well designed for that. So, because Hypertable will physically keep your data sorted by a primary key, it is well suited. Cost savings. Hypertable has been designed and implemented for maximum efficiency alongside optimum performance. So by choosing to do the implementation in a compiled language, so that does not incur any significant performance or stability costs like garbage collection or runtime interpretation. So also Hypertable can also deliver equivalent database capacity on a fraction of the hardware. So this means you're saving costs on equipment, power consumption, and less real estate for your data center. Clean semantics, Hypertable is a consistent database. So most of the current NoSQL database offerings that are scalable are designed around the concept of eventually being consistent or eventual consistency, which makes these databases more difficult to work with. Eventually consistent databases require complex syntactic or semantic reconcilers, and sometimes they can also lose data. When an application writes data into Hypertable, it gets a success response. Modification is durable and will always be reflected in the subsequent operations. Next, we'll go into the comparisons with the relational database, which is the most common type of database. So, Hypertable you can say is quite similar to an RDBMS because the data representation is in form of tables with rows and columns, and that's the only similar thing. Then the main differences are the row keys are UTF-8 strings. So UTF-8 is a Unicode. Then there is no support for data types. So each and every value is treated in terms of byte sequence with byte code. And there are no support for joins. So things like an outer join, an inner join, a full join, left join, right join, it's not possible. Then transaction support. So that is lacking, like the ACID properties. And each and every table can be thought of massive tables of data sorted by a single primary key, that is the row key. Next, we'll look into the physical layout of a table. So a relational database assumes that each column defined in the table schema will have a value for each row that is present in the table. Null values are usually represented with a special marker, that is the end end of the line, that is the \n. Primary key and column identifier are implicitly associated with each cell based on its physical position within the layout. So this is a representation of how a relational database table might be laid out on the disk. That is the left hand side diagram. The right hand side diagram is the hypertable representation. So like hypertable as well as big table on which hypertable is designed will take its design from log structured merge tree. So what it does, it flattens out the table structure into a sorted list of key value pairs. Each one will represent a cell in the table. So the key includes the full row and column identifier, which means that each cell is provided with complete addressing information. So cells that are null are simply not included in the list. So which makes this design best for sparse data. So that is represented in the right hand side diagram. So though there can be a fair amount of redundancy in the row keys and column identifiers, Hypertable employs prefix and block data compression, which helps to mitigate the problem. Next, we'll be looking at the cell versioning or the 3D cells. So what Hypertable does is it extends the traditional 2D table model by adding a third dimension called the timestamp. So this timestamp dimension can be thought of as like representing different versions of the same table cell, which is shown in the diagram. So when you're querying the table cell, the most recent cell version will be returned first. By default, all cell versions are retained for each column, but the number of versions retained can be capped by specifying the maximum versions option to the column specification in the create table statement. The timestamp can be supplied by the application at insert time or can be auto-generated by default. So next we'll be talking about how scaling works in Hypertable. So this section will only be talking about scalability. So let's say the system has been loaded with the following two tables. The left hand side is the first diagram. In that you can see two tables, a session ID table and a crawl database table. So as you can see, the data is naturally arranged. Over time, what happens is can be seen on the right hand side. The hypertable will break these tables into ranges and distribute them to what are known as range server processes. So these processes manage the ranges of table data and run on all slave server machines in the cluster. So for example, if you are running like three slave servers, you can see what the diagram is representing. That is what the system will look like over time. So the three servers are filled to capacity. Next, if you add more capacity, it is a simple matter of adding like new commodity servers and starting the range server processes again on the new machines. So Hypertable will detect that there are new servers available with plenty of spare capacity, and then it will automatically migrate ranges from the overloaded machines onto the new ones.